Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Imdad Imam. I'm part of the Al Fatima community here. And on behalf of the entire Al Fatima community, I welcome you all, especially our guests from the various churches. And I'd like to thank Dr. Haider Khwaja for taking this initiative to organize this unity celebration. And I'm just hoping that this is not the first one. This is the first one, but this is not the last one. So inshallah, God willing, we'll do this every year. And it doesn't have to happen here every year, but we'll do it every year. So with that, I invite Sister Maheen Fatima to conduct the rest of the program. Maheen.
Salam and good afternoon to all. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the most gracious and the most merciful, we begin. As we gather today at Al Fatima Center to celebrate and reminisce the teachings of a leader who not only made an impact to the American community, but he left his mark for the humanity. His legacy is one of its kind, and we're talking about none other than Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King won the Nobel Peace Prize Award in 1964 for his efforts combating racial inequality through nonviolent resistance. He organized 2 of the 3 Selma to Montgomery Civil Rights Peaceful Marches in the course of his career, and he additionally has led movements to alleviate poverty, humanize capitalism, and oppose Vietnam War. He truly made a significant impact for humanity. For MLK Day, it's an excellent opportunity for American Muslims to reflect upon Islam's support for diversity and racial equality, which originates in the Quran, as quoted, "And of his signs are the diversity of your mankind's languages and your colors. Indeed, in that are the signs for those of knowledge." This is quoted Surah 30, verse 22. The Quran elaborates further in another chapter, "O mankind, we have created you into nations and tribes, that you may come to know one another and not deny one another." Surah 49, verse 13. This is only to elaborate that mankind exists and is diverse people, but humans should welcome this. This message of pluralism within Islam bears striking resemblance to the themes of Martin Luther King Jr. in his "I Have a Dream" speech. With that being said, I would like to welcome an active youth member of our community. She is currently a senior at Siena College with an aspiration to be a lawyer, inshallah. She's active at her college and at Al Fatima Center as well in her own profound way. Please welcome Mariam Jaffrey.
Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Today we gather to reflect on the profound achievements of Martin Luther King Jr., a beacon of hope and a tireless advocate for equality. Dr. King's dream, eloquently expressed in his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech, envisioned a future where individuals are judged not by the color of their skin, but only by the content of their character. Over the years, we have undoubtedly made a significant stride towards acknowledging Dr. King's dream. The civil rights movement of the 1960s marked a turning point in history, sparking transformative changes that dismantled the institutionalized segregation and discrimination faced by African Americans. The tireless efforts of civil rights activists, led by Martin Luther King Jr., resulted in landmark legislation such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which secured essential legal rights for African Americans. As we celebrate these victories, we must reflect on the positive transformations that have occurred in our society. African Americans now have the legal right to vote without facing discriminatory practices, attend integrated schools, and access public facilities without segregation. These changes represent concrete steps towards the fulfillment of Dr. King's dream of a nation where individuals are judged by their character rather than the color of their skin. Diversity and inclusion have become important societal values, fostering a more aware and empathetic generation. Many individuals and organizations are actively working to address social injustices and create a more equitable society. Dr. King's dream has inspired countless individuals to advocate for change, creating a ripple effect that extends far beyond the initial goals of the civil rights movement. In this context, we should review Dr. King's achievements not only as historical milestones, but also as catalysts for ongoing positive change. His legacy challenges us to continue the work that he began, striving for a society where justice and equality are not just ideals, but lived realities for all. Unfortunately, while progress has been made, systematic inequalities do persist. Disparities in education, healthcare, and economic opportunities continue to affect communities of color disproportionately. The struggle for justice extends beyond legislation to the very fabric of our society, requiring a collective commitment to dismantling integrated prejudices and fostering inclusivity. Dr. King's legacy also calls on us to be active participants in the ongoing fight for justice. We must address the root causes of inequality, standing united against discrimination in all of its forms. Education, empathy, and understanding are essential tools in dismantling the barriers that divide us. One area where the quest for justice persists is the struggle of the Palestinian people. Much like the civil rights movement, Palestinians aspire to live in a land where they can enjoy the full spectrum of human rights. Recognizing the complexities of the Middle East conflict is vital for us to approach this issue with empathy. As we contemplate Martin Luther King's achievements, we are reminded that his dream extends to the universal pursuit of justice and equality. Our duty is to advocate for fairness within our borders and on the world stage. In doing so, we contribute to the global movement that echoes the principles of that Dr. King stood for. Let us also consider whether his dream has fully come true. While there is undeniable progress, the reality is that we have yet to reach the promised land of complete equality. We must remain vigilant, pushing for change, and holding ourselves accountable for creating a society where the ideals of justice and fairness are fully realized. Let us honor Martin Luther King Jr. by renewing our commitment to the pursuit of his dream. Together, as a diverse and united community, we can bridge the gap that still exists and strive towards a future where all men and women, regardless of their background, stand on equal ground. Dr. King's dream lives on, urging us to build a society where the content of one's character truly prevails over the color of their skin. Jazakallah.
All right, thank you, Mariam. The next speaker I would like to welcome is one of the pillars of our community. He is the resident scholar of Al-Fatma Center, providing his insightful consultations and teachings to our community. He has studied many years in Iran regarding Islamic theology. In the midst of all, he has published a few Islamic books and continues to give his valuable time to the members of this community. Maulana Yaqub Akhundi.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. First of all, I would like to say thank you to celebrate this beautiful event today. We have gathered here to remember this great personality. And believe me, I had no idea and no knowledge about this personality, but when I started reading some sayings, I came to know and I found that most of his sayings are very similar to Imam Ali alayhi salam's sayings in Nahj al-Balagha. You can read one saying here on the top of this banner, Dr. Martin Luther King is talking about infinite hope. And this is exactly what Allah says in the Quran. قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ. Don't lose your hope in Allah's mercy. And he is talking about infinite hope. And this is what Allah says in the Quran. Believe me, irrespective of his religion, irrespective of his faith, irrespective of his origin, just look at what does he say. I would like to share with you some sayings of Dr. Martin Luther King, and then we will compare them with the sayings of Imam Ali in Nahj al-Balagha. For example, Dr. Martin Luther King is talking about forgiveness. He says, forgiveness is not an occasional act, but it is a permanent attitude. And our Imam Ali alayhi salam says in Nahj al-Balagha that the most pious people amongst you are those who always forgive others' mistakes. How similar they are. Dr. Martin Luther King says, the time is always right to do what is right. Yeah? The time is always right to do what is right. But Amirul Mu'mineen Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam says in Nahj al-Balagha that take advantage of your time and don't miss that opportunity if you want to be successful in this world. Dr. Martin Luther King says, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Imam Ali says to his son Imam Hassan that, "O my son Hassan, the state cannot be established with injustice. O my son, be angry with oppressors and be kind with oppressed." You can see how similar they are. The sayings of Martin Luther King, if we look at Nahj al-Balagha and the verses of Quran, we can find easily then the words of Dr. Martin Luther King are similar to the words of Quran and the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Maulana Saab. Now, the next speaker I would like to welcome is not only an activist for the community, but she's a remarkable financial compliance attorney with nearly 20 years of Wall Street experience with the largest names in the international banking. As of recently, she has proudly worked with like-minded community members for the past 2 months and gotten Albany Common Council to pass the first ceasefire resolution in New York State for the war in Gaza. But along with these paper accolades, she's a proud mother of 3 beautiful children, Aya, Yusuf, and Amana. Please welcome Mehek Jamil.
That's good. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm honored to be amongst you all today, and certainly amongst the esteemed speakers who came before me. My sincere thanks to Uncle Heather and the entire Al Fatma leadership team for including me and organizing this beautiful community event for us all. As Mahin mentioned, my name is Mehek Jamil. I'm an attorney, a mother, a lifelong learner, and I'm here just to share a few thoughts on a giant of this century, Dr. Martin Luther King, a remarkable leader whose principles of equality, justice, and civil rights have quite literally shaped not only American culture, but the fight for resistance globally. And I'd like to just touch quickly on how the Muslim community can and should take from the example of Dr. King's life and ideas to propel ourselves forward into meaningful civic engagement. Dr. King's journey began in the heart of the American South amidst the turbulence of racial segregation and discrimination. He was born in January of '29 in Atlanta, Georgia, and grew up witnessing the stark realities of racial injustice. But rather than succumbing to the oppressive forces of the time, Dr. King emerged as a steadfast advocate for change. Dr. King's leadership during the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955 marked the beginning of a new era in the fight for civil rights. The boycott, sparked by Rosa Parks' courageous refusal to give up her seat on a bus, showcased Dr. King's organizational skills and his ability to mobilize communities for a common cause. The successful outcome of the boycott not only led to the desegregation of public transportation, but also propelled Dr. King onto the national stage. His famous, iconic "I Have a Dream" speech, delivered during the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedoms in '63, remains one of the most iconic moments in American history. In it, Dr. King passionately articulated his dream of a nation where individuals would not be judged not only by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, as you heard Sister Mariam just allude to as well. This dream resonated with millions, transcending racial lines and inspiring a collective vision for a more just and inclusive society. But Dr. King's message of equality and justice continues to echo through the corridors of time, resonating with people of all backgrounds. His dream of a nation where people are judged by their character rather than superficial traits remains a beacon of hope for those who have faced discrimination, including our own Muslim community. Just as Dr. King fought against racial injustice, Muslims in America have grappled with stereotypes, prejudice, and a lack of understanding rooted in ignorance. This was our unfortunate status quo before October. But for all of us in this room and hundreds of millions across the world, our lives, our realities, our worldviews were materially altered October 7th and every day thereafter. For our brothers and sisters in Palestine, the struggle is without a doubt unbearably painful, excruciatingly dire. But for us here, us privileged Westerners living in all the comforts of our first world lives, there is a uniquely separate dire struggle before us. We are now faced with the unbelievable challenge of showing our courage, showing our character. What will we do for our community? How will we show up to right wrongs? What will we say when it is inconvenient? The community must find inspiration in his commitment to peaceful protest and dialogue. By employing nonviolent means, we too can bridge gaps, dispel misconceptions, and foster a more harmonious society. It is only through dialogue and understanding that we can dismantle the walls of misunderstanding and build bridges of unity. Further, the Muslim community can draw inspiration from Dr. King's emphasis on civic engagement and voting rights. Actively participating in the democratic process is a powerful means for our community to shape its own destiny. By exercising the right to vote and engaging in our civic responsibilities, Muslims will contribute to building a society that aligns with the principles of justice and equality. Moreover, Dr. King's emphasis on the interconnectedness of all communities highlights the importance of building alliances. The struggles for civil rights and religious freedom are interconnected, and by collaborating with other marginalized groups, the Muslim community can amplify its voice and work towards dismantling systemic injustices that affect us all. Dr. King's vision was not confined to the African American struggle alone. It encompassed a broader commitment to worldwide justice and human rights. So as we reflect on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s life, let us not merely remember him as a historical figure, but as a guiding light whose principles continue to illuminate our path towards a more just and compassionate society. Let us draw inspiration from his legacy to confront the challenges of our time with courage, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to justice. Let us not fall into the trap of just quoting his wise words when it is convenient and mainstream to do so, but remember the conviction with which he uttered them. And finally, let us reflect on the teachings of our own deen and creed, and Allah's promise in Surah Ra'd that he will not change the condition of a people unless they change themselves. It is imperative we put in the work to change our collective experience. The future of our Muslim community in the West depends on it. So in the words of Dr. King, like you just heard from the Maulana, the time is always right to do what is right. May we all be inspired to follow in his footsteps and see a world where the ideals of equality and justice become a reality for us all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mehak Baji. Our next guest speaker is the Executive Director at New York State Council of Churches, which represents 7,500 Protestant congregations across the state. He serves as a co-chair of India Working Group for Secretariat for International Religious Freedom. He's committed on doing social justice in the spirit of Dr. King. Please welcome Reverend Peter Cook.
Thank you. It is such an honor to be here with all of you today. My name is Peter Cook. I'm Executive Director of the New York State Council of Churches, as was mentioned, and I'm particularly pleased as the director to be in solidarity with our Muslim brothers and sisters as we have vociferously sought to stand up to the scourge of Hindu nationalism, including speaking out on another resolution before we got to the ceasefire against the oppressive immigration laws that were taking place in India. And more recently, of course, speaking out in favor of the ceasefire resolution for the Albany Common Council, which we think is absolutely the just and right thing to do in light of this horrific war which is underway in Gaza and Israel. I wanted to share with you a few words today as we remember the life and legacy of Dr. King. I want to say at the outset that Dr. King was predisposed in all of his writings to embrace diversity, embrace people of all religions and races. And he, by contrast, never wanted to have his faith or anybody else's faith be used as a way to assert an exclusivity that was used to oppress people of other religions. So I want to look at three aspects of nationalism through the lens of Dr. King. First of all, some have claimed that Dr. Martin Luther King was a Zionist and therefore would support the state of Israel in its quest to be an exclusively Jewish state. That would be a distortion of his views on Zionism. It is true that people of his time had high hopes for Israel as a place of safety for Jews in the wake of the Holocaust. But this safety became elusive when it involved the displacement and even elimination of religious minorities, and most especially Palestinian Muslims and Christians. King, in his Zionism, embraced the tradition of Judaism, but that tradition was one that welcomes all people and accorded them with dignity. I found a quote from the book of Leviticus that says, "And if a man from another country is living in your land with you, do not make life hard for him. Let him be to you as one of your countrymen, and have love for him as for yourself." This comes from Hebrew scripture and certainly does not embrace an exclusivist Zionist vision. Secondly, I am no expert on Islam, but I don't think, from what I know of it, that it seeks to embrace nationalism in the same way that some Jews embrace Zionism or Christians embrace Christian nationalism. A while back in an article in Time magazine, there was a man named Nihad Awad who stressed Islam's respect for diversity and how it originates in the Quran. While describing many of Allah's signs for mankind, the Quran states, "And of his signs is the diversity of your mankind's languages and your colors. Indeed, in that are signs for those of knowledge." He goes on to stress that although the Quran is generally only considered canon in the original Arabic, this verse suggests that God intended people to speak many other languages and exist as different cultures. The Quran elaborates further in another chapter saying, "O mankind, we have created you into nations and tribes, that you may come to know one another and not deny one another." Indeed, God says that mankind is not only destined to exist as diverse peoples, but that we as humans should welcome this and actively try to understand people who are different from ourselves. The message of pluralism within Islam bears a striking resemblance to the themes of Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech. And finally, in my own tradition and that of Dr. King's, Christian nationalism is incompatible with the Christian faith. The kissing cousin of Christian nationalism in our country is something we call Christian Zionism, which is propagated by the American religious right and is second only to AIPAC in terms of money and influence when it comes to bear on the issue of Palestine and Israel. Christian Zionism supports the formation and strength of the state of Israel, not out of any love or concern for the Jewish people, but as a strategy to gather Jews in one place and, by the way, remove them from the diaspora, to send them away to the Holy Land. And then when they are gathered in one place at the end times, so this theory goes, the Jews will be separated from Christian believers. And if they convert to Christianity at the end times, they'll be saved. But if they don't, they will burn in hell. Muslims, according to this Christian Zionist view, are a lost cause, and it's telling that Christian Zionists are particularly disdainful of Palestinian Christians, who they lump together with Muslims and some broad categories of what it means to be Arab. As Christians, we believe that when Jesus returns, his embrace will be a kingdom of justice, which lifts up everyone and does not engage people in some kind of religious litmus test. So finally, King, as part of his Christian faith, embraces diversity and speaks against nationalism and exclusivity. He would speak vociferously against the current violence, especially if it received any kind of religious justification. He was against racism, poverty, and militarism, and would be mindful always of how all faiths can be twisted to embrace power and subjugation instead of embracing justice, diversity, equality, and liberation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reverend. Our final guest speaker, who's a keynote speaker for today, formerly served for the past 10 years as a pastoral counselor in the New York Life program. He continues to serve at the Union Missionary Baptist Church of Albany, as well as the District Baptist Association and the Empire Baptist Missionary Convention of New York. He's an avid mentor, a teacher, and a preacher. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Victor Edwin Covington.
Thank you. May God be praised. I am so honored and so privileged and so blessed to be in such a gathering today. I'm also asking God, why did he put me up last? Because everyone has covered most of the things that I had prepared to say. But he knows what he's doing. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. dedicated his life to nonviolent struggle and justice for everyone in the United States of America. I want to look back a little bit on what knit this man together. What was on his heart and mind when he was like a young person like that? How do we get such a awesome person? He was born Michael King Jr. In 1934, his father, a pastor of Atlanta's Ebenezer Baptist Church, he traveled to Germany. And he was very much impressed, his father was, by the teaching of the Protestant Reformation leader Martin Luther. As a result, King Sr. changed his name as well as the name of his 5-year-old son, Martin Jr. King was a gifted student in school, so gifted that he skipped grades 9 and 12 and enrolled in Morehouse College at the tender age of 15. Morehouse was the alma mater of his father and his maternal grandfather. And although the King was the son and the grandson and the great-grandson of Baptist ministers, he did not intend to follow their example. He was not going to be a preacher. But he ran into a gentleman by the name of Benjamin Mays, a noted theologian in Morehouse, and he convinced him to become a preacher of the gospel. King was ordained a minister even before graduating college with his first degree in sociology. And after earning a degree in sociology, he earned a divinity degree from Crozer Theological Seminary, and he graduated from Boston University, where he received his PhD. King's I Have a Dream speech, as noted as it is, was not his first speech at the Lincoln Memorial. 6 years before that iconic speech, I Have a Dream, that we all remember and quote so well, Dr. King was among many civil rights leaders who spoke during a prayer pilgrimage for freedom on May 17, 1957. He delivered his first national address on the topic of voting rights. His speech, which he argued America to give us the ballot. That was his first speech at the Lincoln Memorial. King was in prison 30 plus times. He was in prison 30 plus times. He was arrested for acts of civil disobedience and on many occasions trumped up charges, such as the one that landed him in the Montgomery, Alabama jail. He was arrested in 1956 for driving 30 miles per hour in a 25 mile per hour zone. But he capitalized on his imprisonment. He didn't sit there and sulk. He stayed there, and as the Apostle Paul did for many of his imprisonments, he was still concerned about the welfare of people, writing letters even from prison. King, assassinated in 1968, was not the first attempt of assassination on his life. While he was having his first book signed, called Stride Toward Freedom, in a bookstore, a woman approached him and asked him, "Are you Martin Luther King Jr.?" He responds, "Yes." And she stabs him, plunges him with a 7-inch letter opener, coming very close to killing him. After hours of surgery, this young Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., after hours of surgery, the surgeon said to him, "If you had sneezed once, you would have died." But how many of you know that we cannot go until God has finished with our work? Members of King's last speech predicted his death. He spoke of not being afraid to die for a good cause. King had come to Memphis, Tennessee in April 1968 to support the garbage collectors' strike. And he says, and I quote, "Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now," he said. "I have seen the promised land." He said, "I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land." At that last speech, he said, "I am happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man." King declared, "Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord." King's mother, many don't think about it. King's mother was slain herself by a bullet. On June 30th, 1974, the 69-year-old Alberta Williams played the organ at a Sunday service inside the Ebenezer Baptist Church. Marcus Wayne Chenault Jr. rose from the front pew and took out 2 pistols and began to fire shots. One of the bullets struck and killed Mother King, who died just a few seats from where her son had preached nonviolence. The deranged gunman said to the Christians that Christians were his enemy, and that although he had received divine instruction to kill King's father, who was in the congregation that day, he killed King's mother instead just because she was closer to him. Let's fast forward. We've mentioned a lot of things that King has done. We celebrate his life. We've declared his one day on our calendars as a day of service. But here in 2024, Dr. King's body was killed, but our gathering here in this Islamic Center today, across racial and religious and cultural lines, lets us know that his legacy, his life, and his love lives on. On one occasion, Dr. King was noted in saying, "Only in darkness can we see the stars." And I want to submit today that while we have come a very long way, it's still very dark. It's dark because black and brown people are 5 times as likely as white people to be imprisoned. It's dark because minority unemployment is consistently higher than other racial and ethnic groups. It's dark. Sexual violence and the predicators of that are being lifted and placed before us to be placed in office. It's dark. It's dark because thousands of children, if not millions, go to bed hungry on a daily basis. It's dark. It's dark because unequal wages for black and brown people still exist. Oh, it's dark because we still deal with racial disparities in wealth, in education, in employment, in affordable housing, and again, a rate of incarceration. It's dark. health disparity due to the refusal of adequate research for the development of effective medications and treatment for people of color is still making us live in a dark place. And yet immigrants are flooding through our borders, seeking something that they think we have and yet we really don't have. It's dark. So as I take my seat, I want to suggest just a couple of things that we can continue to honor Dr. King's life, his dream, that may hopefully position all of us, every human being, for a brighter day. One thing I think, the first thing I want to suggest is we must embrace imagination. We must embrace imagination of a world that is not yet. We need radical dreams that will drive our lives, that will motivate our community, work in the community, that will help us live and work one with another. Dr. King says this, faith is taking the first step, even when you can't see the whole staircase. And I want to suggest that we have to embrace imagination. As we seek to keep Dr. King's dream alive, we must recall and remember the words of that great philosopher and theologian, Howard Thurman. He says to us, we do not have to be slaves or victims of our current experience. We do not have to be prisoners of the events of our lives. We can imagine something better. Secondly, I want to suggest that if we're going to live and see King's dream and God's desire for us to live as human brothers and sisters, regardless of what part of the world we come from, the way in which we worship, how and what we eat, regardless of our differences, one thing we have to do, second thing we must do is we have to come together and work together. We must come together and work together. Our children go to school together. They go to the mall together. They sit in movie theaters together. They ride the buses together. They work on jobs together. And people of faith in houses of worship, churches, mosques, synagogues, temple, we must work together for the equality and the dignity of every human being. Dr. King reminds us this: everybody can be great because everybody can serve, regardless of who you are or where you're from. He goes on to say you don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and your verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love to serve. So we must come together and we must work together. Finally, we must learn to listen to one another and hear what is being said and discern what is not being said. Because often our silence speaks more than our words. People fail to get along, Dr. King says, because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. They do not know each other because they have not communicated with one another. We must embrace imagination. We must come together, and then work together. And then we must communicate and listen to one another. In closing, allow me to recall the sentiments once again of that great theologian Howard Thurman, and finally Dr. King. Howard Thurman says this: when the song of the angels is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and the princes are home, when the shepherds are back in their flock, the work begins. To find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild nations, to bring peace among the people, and to make music in our hearts. Dr. King, we are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We're confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In the unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. This is no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous and positive action. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. And now, to close today's session, I would like to invite my scholar uncle, who not only has served this community for the past 30+ years, but continues to build a bridge for the American Muslims to establish their core in the society we live in. Please welcome Dr. Haider Khwaja.
Well, I think I am going to have a longest speech. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Martin Luther King. In 1963, more than 60 years ago, Dr. Martin Luther King delivered a speech and began a movement that would rock this country to its core. You went to defy the laws of the country and stood for something that would change the direction of life for generations to come way after yours. For this, I thank you, Martin Luther King. It was your courage, strength, passion, but most importantly, your love for others that took you on a mission to change the country for the better. Those who followed you and stood with you saw a leader they could trust. Therefore, the course of life changed for everyone. You were never for just one ethnicity, and your movement was not about one over the other. It was for all people, all ethnicities, and for equality all around. I thank you, Martin Luther King. This is our first celebration of the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. On behalf of Al-Fatima Islamic Center, I would like to extend my thanks to all of you for coming out in this cold afternoon for this powerful gathering, a chance to come together as a community in solidarity, appreciation, and reflection on how we are keeping Dr. King's ideals alive. And I will cherish this moment always. I would like to thank our youth speaker, Mariam Hussain, for a wonderful speech with so many powerful words. My sincere gratitude to my favorite Mehak for your message that in the light of Martin Luther's work, what our Muslim community needs to do to advance our causes and to be civically engaged for a better future. It was clear that you put a lot of thought and preparation into your talk, and it showed. Pastor Peter Cook, thank you so much. I met you in the Albany Commons Council, and I was very impressed with you. Thank you so much for coming and for your stimulating speech. I want to express my heartfelt appreciation to our keynote speaker, Pastor Victor Covington, for taking the time to speak to us, making this event memorable. Your wisdom, and insights on Martin Luther King were truly enlightening. Thanks for all the volunteers for the arrangement, particularly Afsa, Zeba, Rahat, my better half Rizwana, my sister-in-law Amna, Rahat, Imran, and Jafar for all the arrangement. Finally, thanks to my niece, Dr. Mahin Fatma, for conducting today's event very amicably. Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much. So we have a light refreshment, and I think it's in our hallway. And again, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank all my guest speakers. Thank you so much.